Greta, I've got a question. So in regards to biology, in the past, biology forced certain gender roles upon us. But since we overcame biology in some ways, and since we tricked biology and women don't have to get pregnant, and you can deal with a lot of issues that women couldn't deal with as easily in the past, is it possible that we created an unnatural world where people will never be happy in because we tricked nature and nature will fight back against us? And I'm not saying that's just a question.
I don't think we have tricked nature as much as we like to think, actually. Women,
Mother Nature is angry.
There are reliable birth control methods, and that's true, but the underlying psychology that accompanies our inbuilt biology hasn't have not changed in the past 200,000 years, and it's a very, very long time.
Sorry, Greta. Sorry, could you say the last sentence again, because you were breaking up in the middle?
So our brains have not actually changed at all in the last 200,000 years as a species. Yeah. And also the hormones that regulate our basic bodily functions and also that affect our brains are exactly the same. So we have an illusion that we're somehow free. And biologists can fall into this trap when you just attribute too much significance to hormones and brain differences and all that. And I don't want to fall into that trap either, but they are important. I mean, we can't dismiss them.
Yeah, I think they're important. You know, they're important on the macro level to explain the trends in the choices that the sexes make. Because, you know, feminists rail against the fact that there are more male CEOs and there are more male politicians and there are more female homemakers. And I think that's easily explained by the biology. You know, what I don't think would be right is for us to enforce gender roles, because we are all individuals, you know, and as much as there are sex differences in how we tend to think and act and what our priorities are, there's so much variation too. You know, and I fully believe that there are, you know, women who have masculine elements and tendencies in their brains and men who have the opposite, and they should be free to make the choices that are right for them. You know, the 1 in 7 women who are work-centered should be free to go and pursue their, you know, career goals. And, you know, maybe should be encouraged to find a husband who is happy to look after the kids and, you know, be encouraged to respect him and value him for that.
Yeah.
Well, can I offer a counter hypothesis as to the disparity between what women say they want and then what women actively pursue? Bitches be crazy.
That's like my motto.
Yeah, actually on your Twitter it says women get your crazy sisters back in line.
Women, rein in your crazy sisters.
Yes.
That was Jordan Peterson in conversation with Camille, actually. But, you know, there's a quote that I love, that I happen to have my little book of quotations here, that I copied down from Christina Hoff Sommers' speech that she gave in like 1990 or something. But it's from a woman called Claire Booth Luce. And she said, "It's time to leave the question of women in society up to Mother Nature, a difficult lady to fool. You have only to give women the same opportunities as men, and you will soon find out what is or is not in their nature. What is in women's nature they will do, and you won't be able to stop them. what is not, but what you will also find, and so will they, that what is not in their nature, even if they're given every opportunity, they will not do, and you won't be able to make them. You know, and I think that's so bloody apt for current climate, because we pour so many resources into pushing women up career ladders and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, just give us equal opportunities. That's all we need, you know, and the ones who want it, the 1 in 7 will take it and will succeed, you know. And both men and women have like a preference for like promoting women and giving women opportunities. Everybody bloody loves women. But, you know, you don't need to privilege them. And if you do privilege them, then what you will find is, like with these, you know, where women are encouraged to train as GPs, you know, they end up either dropping out of the profession or working half the time, you know, and the taxpayer pays for that.
I think it's a bit like the you know, the common problem where if you are too lethargic, you know, if you don't do enough, you end up feeling more stressed and more anxious than if you fulfill your day with tasks to keep you occupied. Basically, that, you know, that old adage that there's nothing better than a good night's sleep after a long day at work. And I think that because feminism is constantly telling women not to sort their own problems but demand that somebody else do it, you know, so the government or men or society or big business or whatever, it's always somebody else's problem. It's never women's problem to take the initiative. I think women themselves don't have a sense of purpose because they don't know what to do. You know, in the past, when people they had to do what was pragmatically necessary, not necessarily what they wanted to do, but they certainly had a purpose, they had a role. You know, men were fathers and providers, and women were mothers and nurturers, and they definitely knew exactly what their role was in society. And we have the freedom now to choose our role in society, but feminism is telling women that rather than pursuing it, they should essentially hold back until it's perfect. Don't go into STEM fields because the men hate you. Wait until STEM fields are perfect. Wait until the doors are thrown open and degrees are just given to you. Then you'll be welcome in STEM fields. And until then, stay the hell away from them. So I don't think women feel invited to fulfill their roles. And so they don't know what to do with themselves, and it leaves them in a state of perpetual anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have two problems. I think we have a problem in society with policing men too harshly. And so, you know, we don't allow men to be human. You know, certainly, you know, the likes of adolescent boys who might clumsily try to pick up a woman, will like come down on him like a ton of bricks if he does it wrong. But then I think the kind of counter problem that we have with women is that women are never offered any kind of guidance on how to be a good woman anymore.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. Greta, you, in one of your videos, you said you're guilty of wanting a masculine man and looking for masculinity in a man. From your own role and from the role of man in society, how can we bring balance back? And do you think that both men and women struggle at the moment with this unclearness of what their roles are? How can we bring some clearness back? And in a biological way, what do you think? What are our roles from your perspective?
I wish I could prescribe a solution to that. There's definitely a lot of confusion, and everyone is, young people especially, seem very lost. There are just so many mixed messages bombarding us for all kinds of directions. I wouldn't necessarily go to biology for the answer though either, because again, I don't believe.
I'm just asking about biology because it's your field. That's why I'm asking. But if you have other approaches, that's absolutely fine.
I definitely agree with Elizabeth in that we should treat everyone as individuals. I consider myself a classical liberal more than anything else. And I do think that's a great invention of the West, you know, placing this importance and on the individual and liberating individuals. What's interesting is that in Scandinavian countries, though, we can see that women tend to still gravitate towards not necessarily traditional gender roles, but traditionally female career choices. You know, most engineers are male and computer scientists, and then women choose more occupations like teaching and nursing and all that. So I do think the ultimate solution is to liberate people, to give them the choice to take control of their own lives. But then obviously we have this dilemma, because then feminists who are really adamant that something is still stopping them and there's still an obstacle that they have to overcome, they're always gonna be really condescending towards women who kind of embrace traditional roles, because they're gonna see those women as representing the exact idea they're escaping from in a way. So it is a huge dilemma. Can you accept everyone's choices? Is it really possible? I'm not convinced it's possible. I wish it was. I just don't really see us going in that direction. It just seems to me that people are more and more divided along ideological lines, and that's less conversation.
It's I would in developed countries that the gender diversity in jobs is vaster than in developing nations. In developed countries where people can choose whatever career suits their best interests, men tend to do more traditionally male jobs and women tend to do more traditionally female jobs. And it's only when the economy is bad that gap closes. And naturally you would say, well, this is wonderful. The genders are diverse and they complement each other. So long as the door is open for everybody, we'll let them pursue whatever they want. But instead, feminism somehow says Uganda is a more equal place than the UK.
Or in India, for example, there are more female engineers and computer scientists per capita than in Scandinavian countries, because the women have to make very conscious choices, and if they know the state is not going to look after them, they have to, if they don't find a rich enough husband, they're dependent on themselves. Whereas in Norway, you can study lesbian dance therapy or whatever, you know, or women's
not starve.
Yeah. You have something to fall back on. You have that protection.
In regards to like liberal ideals, and I would say that I was always a very, very liberal person as well, and libertarian. I do like the fact that everybody can do pretty much whatever they want to do, but isn't there potentially a problem with social cohesion, that there are just no norms and that people can't identify with anything anymore? And I was thinking in tribal civilizations, for example, you had initiation into womanhood and an initiation into manhood, where it was clear, now you are a woman, and it comes with certain duties and certain privileges and responsibilities. And we have none of that. Like, nobody knows when you are a man anymore. Nobody knows when you're a woman, because it's not really talked about. Everybody is everything and everybody is nothing. And that has a positive quality. But it also comes
unsettling.
Uncertainty and potential chaos.
The dilemma. That's exactly the dilemma I refer to. Every culture, if it's to survive, needs an underlying structure, a mythology, something, a shared belief system. And just to quote Jesus said that a house that's divided against itself cannot stand, and that's just an eternal truth. And that's exactly what we see in the West today, unfortunately.
Well, can I just answer Philip's point by saying, I believe, with evidence, like I said, that when the economy is good and when jobs are available, men and women do show their gender traits. I do believe if society doesn't artificially stop it, men and women will be men and women. I think they are naturally drawn to be different and be complementary. And I think it's society enforcing this androgyny that's preventing it. It's not something that we would drift towards naturally. It's something that we would drift away from naturally, but it's a vortex that political pundits are pulling us into.
There are three proofs for that, by the way. The first one is that we see sex roles in animals too, especially in mammals. I mean, they're really obvious. They're not coherent across species, but we do see differences. It's easy to differentiate the sexes of most mammals. Hyenas are one of the exceptions because the females look exactly like the males, and their clitorises are just as large as the penis of the males, which is but that's an exception.
It looks really freaky. I saw a video. It looks scary.
Don't ever look up hyena labias, please, for the God's sake.
No, we're definitely not going to do it.
For the sake of your sanity.
My favourite Pornhub search.
For the sake of your soul and the little baby Jesus, don't look up hyena labias.
Go on. So that was one proof.
And then the second one is that we see gender differences as early on as the first day of life.
Yeah.
Baby. And the classic example is that baby girls, newborns, prefer to look at faces, and little boys prefer to look at moving mechanical objects like toy cars and things like that.
Boys like things that
third? Was there a third?
Yeah, there was.
I know. No, it wasn't going to be
cross-cultural differences. So every single culture in written history, as far back as 5,000 years ago, there were slight nuances, gender differences, but generally it's always the women who will have.
No. They were all reading from the big book of patriarchy. It's pure.
Of course.
Well, see, my gender studies teacher tried to tell us that because, laugh it up, Liz. My gender studies teacher tried to tell us because Georgian aristocratic men would wear makeup, that proves that gender is completely a social construct. And it's like, no, you vapid dumb cow. The reason that Georgian men wore makeup is because makeup was incredibly expensive and they were showing their money on their face. The average Georgian male did not wear makeup because he was too busy doing manual labor. So what she chose, as feminists always do, they look to the 1% and then decree that all of history was based on what the 1% did.
But it's the same when
that's a feminist thing, isn't it, as well?
I'm not sure at what stage in their civilization that trend emerged, but usually, and Camille Paglia talks a lot about it, if we look at when a civilization nears its collapse, its final phase, that's where we see the androgyny, the experimenting with the genders, and men becoming more like women.
You mean like right now?
Yeah.
There's a quote.
The wolves are at the door.
There's a quote that I actually use whenever this conversation comes up, and I believe it was Elizabeth who gave me it. And Liz, perhaps you can tell me where it came from. That basically we get so wrapped up in sophistry and ridiculously unimportant nonsense because of how privileged our lives are, that we forget what's important and we lose touch with it. So the quote that I'm sure Elizabeth gave me was, the Romans were discussing the garb of angels when the barbarians were at the gates.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the Romans. It's the Babylonians, I think. And yeah, they were discussing the sex of angels. That was like the big intellectual debate at the time. And then I think it was the Ottomans came in and like ransacked the city and that was the end of them. And I don't see what relevance it has to today. What are you talking about?